What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Before I introduce my man, Mark Meincke from up in Canada, that area up north, I want to first let everybody know where they can hear the podcast. Pretty much everywhere, iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. You can find it everywhere there's a podcast. You can look up Two Dates and a Dash. All I ask that you do is hit the subscribe button and the automatic download button. That helps with my analytics, and I'd appreciate that. If you want to learn more about me personally, the things I'm doing with leadership development and mentoring youth, or about my book, A Brother's Love, a Memoir, you can visit www.mattkubbler.com. All right, without further ado, my man, Mark, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, man, thanks for having me on, brother.
I'm looking forward to hearing your story. When your representative reached out to me about getting you on different podcasts, and one being mine, I was honored and flattered, and I'm glad we were able to set this up.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm trying to get on as many American shows as I can because only 23% of my audience is in the States. The bulk is everywhere else in the world. And that's just not right because you guys have a veteran population around 19 million. It's a pretty large veteran population. Ours is more like 2 million. So, it doesn't seem right that it's only 23% of my audience. So trying to balance that out.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service to your country, as I am very proud of my service to mine. And I see we have the same barber, the same eye doctor, and the same facial designer. I like
Well,
that.
we could be twins. Matter of fact, that maybe I am you, just with a different color beard. Could be.
You're the Canadian Matt Kubler, or I'm the Canadian Mark Meincke. One of the
There you
two.
go.
Or I'm the American Mark Meincke. So, first of all, number one, God only made so many perfect heads, and the rest he put hair on.
That's right.
We have that out there.
It's a solar panel
is
for
beautiful.
as they say.
Yes. So listen, I know you haven't been on the show before. You haven't probably seen a whole lot of my episodes, but I asked one question, and simply because it's the easiest question to ask, because who I think you might be is not necessarily who you think you are. So I always ask this question of every guest, and I'm not going to skip you simply because we look the same. So my question to you is, who's Mark Meincke?
I'm a guy trying to get better. And when I have a bag of cookies, I like to share that bag of cookies. And in this case, the bag of cookies is recovery. So I went undiagnosed with PTSD for over 20 years. And really the genesis of that was my time in a war zone. So just you were in the Gulf War. Just after that was, and like just after that, like a year after that, was the Balkans. And the Canadians were there right early in the conflict, right from 91. My tour was in 94, so it was still in the middle of the heat of the war. And it was a genocide. It was a hell of a thing. And it was too much. And the injuries that I received from there, I knew something was wrong, and the people around me knew something was wrong, and things weren't right, but nobody was talking about PTSD in 1994. It just wasn't a conversation. We've come a long way, though. Had my behavior been witnessed back then, had that behavior been witnessed today, somebody would have tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Mark, we got to talk, and you need to talk to somebody. You need some help here, brother. You're just a wild man. You're out of control." But over 20 years, undiagnosed, train wreck of a life as a result. And when I finally did reach out for help in my second marriage, I had the benefit of a wife who was kind enough that when I was losing my shit over absolutely nothing to my little kid, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Mark, they're just crumbs. We can sweep those up." And then I suddenly just had that aha moment that some people never have, unfortunately. But I had it, reached out for help, and part of that help was a peer support group. So from that peer support group, Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast, was born, because I thought, well, these people are driving 2-3 hours once every 2 weeks just to be part of this peer support group. It's obviously really important to them, and they never miss one. So how do I offer this to the world? How do I scale it, make it more accessible? So you could just plug in whenever you want. And that's Operation Tango Romeo, the podcast.
I love it. Yeah, I suffered with PTSD before, like you did. And I didn't know I would have never called it PTSD until I realized what PTSD was later on. I just thought I was depressed. But for people that don't understand essentially what PTSD is, and it's not necessarily a conflict or battle or combat driven issue. It's a fact that your brain can't handle trauma. It's something it wasn't prepared for, that it can't process and handle in a safe and appropriate manner. And for me, when my brother died, it was such a shock to my inner core and to my brain and to my soul that I couldn't process his death healthfully. And I spent 13 years in the darkness that I never want to go back to again. But sadly, with COVID, I realized that I also have some sort of a traumatic problem with covering my face. When I was in the Gulf, we wore a mask every day, a gas mask. And, I remember, and it's funny how you say you don't realize it's happening initially. Like when my wife and I went on our honeymoon, we went snorkeling and I had a panic attack. And I've never had a panic attack in my life. And I'm always pretty much in control. I was angry and pissed off when my brother died and I couldn't wrap my head around his death, but I was still functioning every day. I was just functioning internally negatively. But when I had that panic attack on our honeymoon, I was like, what the hell is happening to me? Like I felt like I couldn't breathe, even though I knew I could breathe through the snorkel. And even though my nose was covered with the mask, I could still breathe through my mouth if I was out of water. But even then I had to get everything off. I just couldn't do it. So when I realized I'm just not going to snorkel again, right? That's what you do. You just stop doing the thing that makes you have a panic attack. Well, flash forward 20 years, more than that, 25 years almost. They now want us to cover our faces. And the minute I put a mask on, I thought I was going to die. And I couldn't explain to anyone. And nobody gives a shit if you feel that way right now. That's just, nobody cares. You're killing my mom and pop if you don't wear a mask, and you're horrible. And so you add that to the mix of the fact that whatever's happening inside you is real, but nobody gives a shit. And now you got to deal with the stress of, well, do I go out and not wear a mask and make everybody flip the shit? Or do I just not go anywhere? Like there's that conflict inside of you. So I can totally wrap my head around, what you went through and then the value of talking to somebody.
Well, peer support is the only place where you can talk with other injured vets that get it. And we are the worst peer supporters in the world. we're so douchey to each other for different reasons. And it's all well-meaning. But the old attitude of PTSD is a weakness. It's a mental weakness. And even the way that you worded it, I would word it slightly differently, that your brain just can't handle trauma. Well, everybody's brain has a breaking point. And it's not even a breaking point. It's just the throttle getting stuck on full. So when you have that amount of overwhelm, one of the instances that tipped it over for me is when I hit a tripwire. I'm the only guy I know that hit a tripwire, didn't explode. I was able to stop in time. The tripwire was super tight against my shins. And then I didn't even want to walk backwards because, okay, well, if I'm on a tripwire, there's probably PMA3s everywhere as well that'll blow my leg off. Well, what do I do? So I backed off the tripwire and I was fully expecting to die. There's a near-death experience, and then there's the moment of, oh, I'm dead, and which is what I thought it was. I thought I was dead. I wasn't worried that I might die. I really thought that was, this is it. This is my last moment, but it wasn't. And the throttle sometimes gets stuck on full because it's just such an intense experience that it just never backs off. And that's why the hypervigilance after. Always on full go, on 10 out of 10 and running scenarios in your mind. Who do I take out first? What are the weapons of opportunity? Where are the threats? Threat assessment. That went on for like 5 years of super hypervigilance. So that's a big part of what PTSD can be. One expert that I had on said that anything that created incredible terror, although it didn't feel like terror at the time, but it definitely was intense. But that can rewire the brain because it's the amygdala that's screwing you up. In normal life, you don't need the fight, flight, or freeze response very often. It's just once in a while. But as a cop on the street, as a soldier in the field, it's on all the time. And we're not wired for that. That's not natural for our brains. Even way back to caveman days, the saber-toothed tiger wasn't all.
Froze there for a second, buddy. Not sure if gotta love the internet. Let's see if we get you back. There you are. You're back.
There we go. Yeah,
there we go.
It's like, man, you're being really still. You're listening very intently, but it was just frozen.
All good. You were saying about the amygdala and how the saber-tooth tiger, and then you sort of froze up there. I think that was a pretty good point.
It just, yeah, the saber-tooth tiger scenario is a rare, that wasn't an all the time thing. It was a once in a while thing. And, but when you're a cop on the street or a soldier in the field, it's not once in a while. It could be quite constant. I have friends that were in Afghanistan that were getting into firefights every damn day for months on end, which is almost unheard of. I mean, that didn't happen in World War II or it was super intense stuff. And for us, with a UN peacekeeping tour, you're always got that because you're so exposed. You're always kind of waiting for your head to explode or the guy next to you to catch a bullet, because you're walking around with the big blue target on your head. Your helmet's painted blue and your carrier's painted white.
Well, just imagine having to be on a peacekeeping tour and being actually that it's really just a bunch of combat missions. It's such an oxymoron, the terminology.
It is peacekeeping. Matter of fact, when I went to cop college, Grant McEwen, and one of the ladies, when she heard one of the stories, she goes, "Hang on, wait a second. You had a rifle with you? Why? You were a peacekeeper." I'm like, "Oh my god!"
Right?
Yeah,
like Greenpeace or something like that.
Yeah. I wasn't in the Peace Corps, but no, people just didn't understand. Peacekeeping is combat, and it's keeping other people who are trying to kill each other from killing each other. And they don't like it when you take their guns away. So sometimes you have to get into a scrap. And actually, 1 year before us, the greatest battle that Canada had been in since Korea had happened. It's called Meincke Pocket, and it was a 4-day intense firefight, mortars, artillery, the whole 9 yards, where basically the Croats were trying to wipe out an entire Muslim village. And the Canadians said, "Nah, no more genocide today. I think maybe we'll just we'll keep you guys at bay." And 4 other countries ran away because they said, "Oh, this is scary," because there's 21 countries there in total. The States were not there, but there were 21 countries in total. The French, of course, ran away, and as did several other. And the Canadians said, "No genocide for you. Sorry. You're not killing everybody in this village today. We've seen too much of that." And yeah, it was a 4-day firefight. That was our 2nd Battalion PPCLI with all the attached units, and including the Calgary Highlanders. And they got a battle honor for it, actually. Biggest battle since Korea. Of course, nobody heard about it. It was a big old secret.
I'm a history buff, and I try to keep myself as aware as possible about everything going on around me, but there's very little that gets put out. And I don't know if that's just because of the way the media works or the way that America works, for Christ's sake, that we don't hear a whole lot about other countries' military exploits. Like there's not a lot of education about, we selfishly or ignorantly or pompously, America always puts itself up as the leader of everything. And while there may be some fact to the size nature of it and the fact that our economy and all the other things that make America America, but at the end of the day, there are just as many brave, valiant soldiers and seamen and Air Force or whatever from any country fighting for whatever they believe in, um, for their country and for the world, that are just as brave and worthy of acknowledgement as any American battle that's ever happened.
There's a lot of learning that happened in Afghanistan. A lot of Canadians that worked with Americans, and once Canadians and Americans work together in the field, there's a instant, pretty healthy respect for each other. A lot of Americans do know that all the sniper records are held by Canadians, so there's some people that know that. But for the level of soldiering, we are such a small little army, just a teeny weeny little army, and we don't have all the cool bells and whistles. We've got some cool stuff, but not anywhere near the level of the U.S., of course. So we don't have a choice. We have to cross train like crazy. In the American Army, there's a specialist for everything. We can't do that. We don't have enough people. So we have to cross train, and everybody has numerous skills. Like in the American Army, the machine gunner is the machine gunner. It's like, no, that's just one of the things that we do. We could all do that, and this and that and the other, and reconnaissance, and we have to. Matter of fact, an interesting little bit of history for you. If you've ever have you ever seen the movie The Devil's Brigade?
Yes.
That's cool. At the America's First Special Service Force, that was people from Canada that came down and created the first Special Service Force, which is now your Green Berets, and that's why they're wearing berets, because that came from us.
Gotta love those little nuggets of historical knowledge, and I guarantee not a single person listening to this on my show is going to know about until now. The best part, so as a cop, people don't understand. It's hard. It's hard to explain how law enforcement works in the United States, because all they see is NYPD or LAPD or Chicago or Philly or whatever. 99% of all police departments have under 10 guys in the United States in each department. That's just the way it is. Because I'll give you an example. Pennsylvania has 640 whatever police departments in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And just think about that. How many little municipalities, we have boroughs, townships, villages, cities, and each one of those has their own government.
And so many divisions of law enforcement. We don't have that up here.
Yeah.
Between everything from Texas Rangers to FBI and everything in between, and DEA, and we don't do that at all.
And in the United States, it is, and it's great in that each town has their own uniqueness to it and their own level of control and governance and security. But the interconnectivity is shit. Like
nobody's talking to
other. Like I can't get on the radio, and I'll give you an example. State Police in Pennsylvania, they have a barracks 10 minutes from me. I can't talk to them on the radio. I have to go through my dispatcher to talk to their dispatcher to tell that guy to then relay it back to me or give them my cell number. Like you would think that should be flawless. And that's why a lot of bad things happen and a lot of high risk situations, because of the lack of communication, the lack of interconnectivity. And I work in a police department our borough is 1.6 square miles. We have 5,000 people in 1.6 square miles and a college. And we're 20 miles outside of Philadelphia. And there's like 30 in 15 miles of me. It's just nonstop police departments. So while it's great as far as employment, it's very difficult to work outside of your jurisdiction in coordination with other departments, because it's so difficult to communicate. You have different policies, you have different procedures, it's a nightmare. And then while the military is great for the United States, there is also that lack of communication sometimes between the different specialties that you talked about. Everybody has their own way of doing something, and everybody has their own responsibility. And as a cop where I'm at, I'm a jack of all trades. I have to know everything. I have to know crime scene processing. I have to know how, I have to put on my own cases. I'm a lawyer. I'm everything. So I'm start to finish. I do everything. So I'm pretty much a Canadian, is what you tell me.
How's the morale down there? I know that from George forward, that, believe it or not, came up here, and it had this, not as hot, there's no burning cop cars up here, but at least not this time. But that came up north and in Calgary, defund the police is happening, and blue lives don't matter right now. It's and the different police forces up here are really sucking for morale. People are dragging their feet and feeling very, very unappreciated, like more than normal. Being a cop has always been a lack of appreciation there, but it's really bad right now. And is it the same there?
My area, I've had some personal stuff happen to me, but it was more politically driven than cop driven. But they used my cop job as a way of getting to me. Philadelphia obviously is a shit show with that, and there was quite a period of time where there was a month straight where it was nonstop looting and rioting and burning of cops cars, and the problem I see with all of this is that it goes from extreme to extreme.
Yeah.
There's no desire to communicate and solve the problem. It's just simply, I just want to be heard, and I just want to make my point, and I don't really care what yours is. And when we get to a point where people can chuck piss bottles or shit balloon bombs or bricks or frozen water bottles or whatever at police officers and have no repercussions, that's when things go out of control. And lawlessness has never been proven to change anything. And do I believe there's problems in law enforcement where there has to be changes? Yes. Do I believe there has to be changes in hiring practices and departmental policies? Yes. Do I think inherently police officers are racist killers? No. And no one will ever be able to prove that to me because I've never met one. And I've worked in 4 different agencies from federal all the way down to local. And I've done everything in law enforcement you can possibly think of. And I've never met a racist cop. Now, I've met some jackoffs. I've met some guys that shouldn't be cops. And I've met some people that are just, they've outlived the profession and they need to get out because their lack of empathy is gone. But that doesn't mean they're racist. That just means they're jackoffs. Like they're assholes. Yeah. And that happens in every profession. But because somebody does something, and I did a TEDx audition, very good TEDx audition, if I don't mind patting myself on the back there. The theme of it was chaos. And so I did a 5-minute live audition in front of a live studio audience and made the finals. And my TEDx was about how the chaos that goes through the mind of a police officer when they're about to pull the trigger, and how people don't get that when you're a cop, you get 18 months of education and training before they throw you out to be perfect.
Yeah.
18 months, the only profession on the planet where you have to be perfect, and you don't get you don't have a second chance at it. Because if you screw up once, if you take someone's life, no matter if it's justified or not, a part of you is gone.
That's right.
A part of your future is gone. A part of your present is gone. Your family feels that. People don't get the magnitude of that choice, and that it's not just high fives afterwards. Great job. You took out the bad guy. There's so much that happens after that. And God forbid if you made a mistake on that choice.
That's right.
And that choice is done. And you talked about it earlier, the fight or flight. Everybody's got that. It's just that there's only a few professions where you get to have to ignore it, right? You don't get the choice to pick the one that's actually living inside of you at that moment, that feeling. You, as a cop, when you go to a call where shit goes sideways like that.
Well, it's fight, flight, or freeze. And the natural, normal thing to do is either freeze or fly.
Right.
And, but we have got to overcome that, and it's fight, and that's an infantry thing for sure. Aggression comes at you. You respond to that aggression with 10 times more aggression, which in an emergency situation works really, really well.
Especially in a military situation, it works. The acceptance level, I think, having been in both, the acceptance level of what you do as a soldier versus what you do as a public servant whose salary is paid by the public is completely different. That
Absolutely.
1% We can't go 10 times higher. We got to go up fraction higher. And even that might be too much in the public's eye. And that's the scary part. That's where I get frustrated, is that having been in combat and having been in shooting situations as a cop, that people don't get the magnitude of the moment. Like I can't bring them into what happened. I can't recreate that scenario.
No, it's like trying to explain an orgasm. You can't. You
Right?
have to do it yourself.
That's a great analogy.
You just can't. It's there are no words for it. And that's one of the things that bond soldiers or cops or both. I find we all speak the same language, really. It's a very similar experience. And we get it with each other. Like, we understand those high stress situations. But the people that need us the most understand it the least. The people that need us the most understand us the least. And I once had when I was a young soldier, and I had a thing for the hippie chicks. They were just, they're so cute, but they sure didn't like me with my high and tight haircut. But I remember asking one to dance at this party, and she looked at me, she goes, you're a soldier? I said, yeah. She goes, well, I don't dance with baby killers.
There you have it.
It's like, holy shit, we've never met. And at that point, I hadn't been deployed yet. So,
I haven't had a chance to kill any babies.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the ignorance. I mean, this is at a university party, and this is how people are programmed. And what I tried to explain to her, I mean, I was talking to a wall, but I said, well, you just remember what you just said. If somebody kicks open your door to do you harm, I'm the type of person that that shows up to help you. When somebody kicks open your door, what do? Give them a hug? You got to fight. You fight, or you get victimized. Those are your choices. And when somebody's never been bloodied, when they've never been punched in the nose, they just don't know. And today, in our world of keyboard warriors, these lippy little keyboard warriors, I just see a bunch of people that have never been punched in the mouth. Because had they actually been punched in the mouth, or if that threat was there, it's like they say in Alaska and the Yukon, that an armed population is a polite population.
Yeah.
And it's true. And it's one of the reasons in an army environment, you're polite with each other, because you know that if you beak off, it's a punch in the mouth. So that's fine if you're willing to accept that consequence. But you know that if I'm going to squawk about this or that, I got to get, it's not going to be just words here. We're going to be throwing some fisticuffs. And that's okay. That's that cowboy culture, and I miss it, actually.
Let me ask you this question, because you sort of touched on a little bit. I call it the pussification of America.
Yeah.
What is it like up in Canada, as far as the culture up there, as far as the prevailing overriding feeling of the country, as far as the shift in the paradigm, especially, I read about some of the stuff that's going on up there, and it seems like there's some of what's happening here is happening up there, as far as
global,
liberalism.
It's global. It's funny, the craziest theories I've ever heard are actually coming true, and it's like the Hunger Games, where the men are not men anymore. The men are feminized. All the alphas are it's toxic masculinity. That's what defund the police is about. It's about dethroning the alpha male is what it seems to be. And all things masculine are deemed to be wrong. And it's taken its toll, but it's rampant, and it's global. It's everywhere. It's everywhere, where it's that sense of independence. So Alberta is like where I am. The province of Alberta is basically Texas North. So in Texas, they have a real sense of independence, the Lone Star State. And there's Americans and then there's Texans,
Right.
and uh, and they got a lot of state pride, and it's like that in Alberta. But in Alberta, the rest of the country thinks we're a bunch of hicks and rubes, which is not the case at all. I mean, the exact same sentiment that's happening in the States, that if you happen to be a conservative, you're a bad person. That's up here too. And you hear it all the time, which is a damn shame because it's just not true. Because right now, where most conservatives are is where liberals were 15 years ago. They're the old conservatives, and yeah, there was a problem with some racism, and yeah, there's still a little bit of it here and there, but it's so minor. It's mostly just a little bit of ignorance, but not hate. You know
That's
what
a
I mean?
difference. That's a huge
It's
difference.
a big difference. There's ignorance because if you grew up in a town where you don't see people that don't look like you, everybody looks like you and thinks like you, then you're not exposed. That's just ignorance and a lack of experience. That's all that is.
I had this
But
conversation, not to cut you off because it's so important.
yeah,
I grew up in a project, and I grew up as the only white kid on my block. I
yeah,
A lot of my friends growing up were all black, and still to this day I have a lot of black friends, and they're all struggling with the situation in the world. And I'm trying to have conversations. And one of them I had a conversation with, and I was trying to explain to him how, on some level, it's not a we're all kind of at fault. Like there's blame to be held by everybody. And I said, if you take a kid from Iowa who never, he grew up in an all white farm town where there were no black people, and he never left his hometown until he was in his early 20s, and he got his first job as a marketing guy in Chicago. And he goes to Chicago, and he goes and he was working now in an office where there's a lot of black people. Well, his impression of what black people are from his 24 years of life are important to give credence to. Like, you can't negate the fact that that's just what happened. Like, that doesn't change just because he doesn't know everything there is to know about interacting with someone who's a different race or different religion or different background. Doesn't mean it's his fault. It just means it's part of who he is. And there has to be education component to that. And the fact that whatever he may have known or heard about from the media or music or movies, that influences your thought process. And you can't simply just call them a racist because they don't know better.
it's
They
it's
can
what
learn better.
it's what you're exposed to. Like
Right. And that's
as
a
a
part of
cop,
everything.
you're in the melting pot. So you've had time, like in your case, you grew up as a minority, so that's good because you have this very very different life experience. Canada is extremely white, especially rural and small towns. That's just how we are, and so for black folk, there's just not a lot up here. Black people stick out like a sore thumb up here because there's just not very many. But that's all changing. And of course, the more central you go, depending on the cities, those demographics change. But if you grew up in Provost, Alberta, Christ, you're like there's like two Korean people, and the rest are white. And First Nations people in the States. You refer to First Nations folks, Indigenous, as Indians. Up here, that's considered quite offensive, so we don't use that term. But and yeah, there is some real racism. But I think First Nations people are for up here. They're the ones that wear it the most. I think are still bruised by it, by the stigmas that go along with that. But again, that's changing. The jokes that I thought were funny in the '80s, God, I'd be mortified if I even heard them nowadays. Much less spoke them. And you just don't hear that anymore. You don't hear any of those jokes about any race anymore, and I prefer that. it's
Oh yeah.
it's better because they're demeaning and dehumanizing, and they're almost completely gone. They just don't happen. I mean, listen to some Rodney Dangerfield material, the misogyny of it. You don't hear that anymore, and I think that's a good thing. I think the evolution that we've done is good. But pretending that we haven't moved socially, that we haven't progressed, is just such a sin. It's such a affront to all the progress that's been made. I mean, Jim Crow isn't happening anymore,
Right.
And I mean, now, not to trivialize, because that was yesterday. That was yesterday. It's only really the last 20, 30 years that we've seen a big difference. I remember in the 90s, there was a rumor that I was gay in the army, and I was really upset by that. But today, I'd play along with it, and I'd make a big joke of it, because I don't care if somebody thinks I'm gay or not. But in the 90s, you freaking cared, especially as a soldier. Like I was mortified. But society's changed, and for the better. I think we're much, much, much more inclusive, less ignorant, and sensitive to respecting. It just boils down to respecting each other. You don't have to understand somebody to respect them and respect the differences. But now it's gone the other way. That if you don't conform to a particular way of thinking, you're bad, and you are the one that is not tolerated if you disagree with the dogma. And so we're on this pendulum, and it's not healthy.
No.
uh, I mean, there's some good parts of it, some really good parts of it, but that pendulum has swung too far into lunacy. And now we're seeing racism where it just isn't there. But we're going, oh my God, that's racist. It's like, well, you know what? Anything that's actually racist, actually hateful, actually dehumanizing, I'll be the first guy there to punch somebody in the nose if need be. But there's just not much of it. And I'm an insider. I'm a white guy in Alberta with a shaved head. So if there is some racism out there, people would feel comfortable being an asshole in my company.
Right.
But it doesn't happen. It is so rare. And in the rare instance that you do hear it, it's responded to. It's like, dude, like the 80s called, they want you back.
Right.
It's like this doesn't fly anymore. That's not cool. And you will be told that that's not okay. But it's so freaking rare. And yeah, people are saying, oh, there's a white supremacist around every corner. I've probably met 20,000 people in my life. If I was going to guess, I've met two white supremacists. And I didn't hate them. I felt bad for them because, like, what the hell happened to you? Like, what's wrong with you? There's just something deeply, deeply wrong with you. And what is that fella's name? He was on the Joe Rogan show, but he's an amazing, amazing man. Oh, you might know his name. But he's a black fella who
Yeah,
befriends.
that went into the KKK, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
he
yeah.
gives them freaking hugs, and he goes to rallies, and I mean, I can't believe there's anything left of the KKK. It was what,
Well,
just
it's strong up here,
oh,
down here.
you're shitting me.
Well, strong. I say strong. I live in an area where probably 15 miles from me, there's a decent contingent of it.
Wow,
Um,
isn't that amazing? It's
yeah,
incredible that still exists.
and that's familial heritage being passed down. That's what that is. This has been there forever. And these are just the offspring of those people. I don't think it's new people. I don't think there's people moving into the area saying, where can I find my local KKK and join? It's not, they're not trying to join the Legion, the American Legion or the VFW. They're trying to join the K. I don't think that's happening. But
Well,
it's
Daryl Davis is his name, Daryl Davis,
yes.
and but from his words, he's like, you know what? Most of them aren't very hateful. They're just ignorant, and I don't mean stupid. I don't mean low IQ. I just mean ignorant. They hold on to ideas that they've been told, that they believe that they are a superior race somehow, and they believe it. And but he combats that with love,
Yeah.
love and understanding, and just like you would any child, because that's what they are. They're not socially evolved people, and I feel really bad for them because there's so much that they don't understand, they don't see, and And thank God for people like Daryl Davis that are fixing it with love and understanding. You can't go up to somebody and scream in their face about how bad they are and expect to change their heart.
Kind of like
Like,
what Antifa's doing,
well,
screaming
that's
in people's
exactly
face.
it. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. All Antifa does is the opposite. Antifa actually validates the KKK.
Yeah.
And
It validates all the fringe groups. It validates all the people that are counter to what is good and right about the world.
that's it. That's it. Because Antifa thinks that everybody's in the Klan, and the Klan thinks that everybody's Antifa. These nutty fringe groups. And the thing is about Antifa, they're well-meaning. They really are. They actually think that Trump's a Nazi, and they believe this shit. It's unfortunate, but I can understand where they're coming from, and I have empathy for it. And they're well intentioned and misinformed. They believe the devil is around every corner, that all cops are bad, and um, the only way is to be kind to them, to be kind, to be understanding, and do the yes ands, not the no buts. So it's like, well, there's this problem and systemic racism. Well, okay, I understand where you're going with that, but are you open to a conversation? Possibly. Like, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong because that doesn't work. You're not going to listen to me anyway. But are you open to a conversation? You
I can
know,
tell you firsthand, they don't want to have a conversation.
no, they don't, unfortunately.
And that's the downside.
But screaming at them that they're a snowflake doesn't help either.
No, that certainly doesn't help either. Tell me more about how you use your platform to help veterans and other people who are suffering through trauma.
Thank you. So I'll start with my mission and vision. And so Operation Tango Romeo, the trauma recovery podcast, is on a mission to save lives and relieve pain by making help for PTS injuries easily accessible with a vision of a world where the path to recovery is clear. Too many people don't know how to get help. They don't know if they're injured or not. So on the show, I have all kinds of experts on, and also people with a lived experience. And they talk about how the injuries have affected them and what tools they use to overcome them. All the different types of modalities, because therapy isn't for everybody. I'm going on 3.5 years of therapy. I'm kind of on the tail end of it, and it's a son of a bitch. It is tough. It is tough. It kicks your ass and actually caused me numerous symptoms because it's very, very invasive, the traditional authorized by Veterans Affairs style of therapy. But it's not the only way. So I have different practitioners from different modalities from around the world talking more and more and more about different options. Everything from equine therapy. I talk about cannabis, which is legal up here, magic mushrooms, those types of things. Talk about exercise, talk about mindfulness and yoga, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I provide as many tools as possible. One that's really interesting, actually, medical solutions. Check out that episode. It's just a few episodes ago, like number 72 or something like that. It's an app on your phone that you put on the headphones, and it's called entrainment therapy. And it helps. It helps with PTSD symptoms. It helps with depression, anxiety, sleep. I suffer from nightmares. It helps there. So I keep searching, find these different modalities, bring the experts on, and we talk about it. But the efficacy of peer support is because we went a little bit down this road earlier. When you get out of the military, you're out. Or when you get out of the police force, you're out. And your friends aren't really there. They were there then, but you're out. So there's nobody to talk to. So you're no longer in the military, but in the civilian world, you don't fit. And people don't understand you. And you run into people who say, hey, have you ever killed anybody? Well, not in the last 10 minutes, but I'm thinking about it. But you are again a fish out of water, which is why a lot of people that get out get back in within a year, or they go truck driving just to get the hell away from people, or they go into something similar like policing because it's a similar environment with similar language, similar culture, different but similar. And the peer support group is the only place where you can find people that are talking the same language, that are respectful of the injury, that understand what the injury is and how it affects your life. And that's where you go to not just learn the lessons, but to feel like you're okay. You're not crazy. You're not a freak. You're not weak. You're just injured, and you get that validation that it really is an injury. It's not something that you say to yourself to make yourself feel better that it's an injury. That's an actual neurological fact. It is a brain injury, and it's a bugger to get over. So peer support by itself is actually shown to have more efficacy for recovery if done correctly than even therapy. It's one of the most important parts. So on Operation Tango Romeo, there's that peer support component, and also highlighting all the other modalities that are available, and it's scalable. And it's also the thing that I can do. Like, each gives as to their ability to give. And the in-person peer support is a little bit too taxing on me. I was just asked again last week to start hosting the peer support more. I did it for a few years, and this is what I can do. Tango Romeo is what I can do. The in-person peer support is just too taxing. So I'm giving as to my ability to give.
I think if you have you clearly have a gift to communicate, and I think um, the hardest part is doing the thing that you're best at, even though other people want you to do other things. Like, that's, for me, I get a lot of stress in my world because people want me to be more of whatever they see me as in their own world, which may not be where I'm comfortable and may not be where I have my most confidence in my ability to produce a result. And I think if you have the level of confidence that you have in your podcast, and being able to reach more people, because I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, is you have um, a passion for helping people and a desire to help as many people as possible. And when you get pulled out of that mindset and go into a singular mode, it sort of feels like you're limiting yourself and your ability to reach. And that's kind of where I've been mentoring kids for 30 years, one-on-one mostly, some small groups, and I loved it. But I always wanted to grow that, and I always wanted to be able to reach more kids. And part of my goal is to ultimately transition my podcast into a more of a youth-based um, mentoring program online using my podcast. So I get exactly where you're at in your desire to do the thing that you feel you can give the most of yourself through.
Well, we all get, it's my way that I can serve, and it took a long time to sort of find that niche. You and I are about of the same vintage, although you look younger. And it's that oil of Olay over there, I think.
That's it.
That's what it is. Clean living. But that desire to serve and its purpose. So doing Tango Romeo is my therapy. One of the and you've seen it, and we all have seen it. The veterans that can't let go. They've been out for 30 years, and yet all of their apparel is still army-esque. you know, and every conversation is back in my day, and it's just all about their entire identity is about being a cop or about being a veteran, and that's all they are to themselves. But that's not all we are. That's a part of what we are. And to replace it, what it is, that missing that sense of service, that sense of purpose and mission. So I am a very mission oriented person. I was a realtor for several years. I couldn't feel that sense of mission. So even though I was doing pretty good at it, I finally decided to throw in the towel. And I did that in September of this year, actually. And I finally left the profession to do other stuff that helps me with my mission, that sense of purpose. And it was kind of scary to do it, but it's working. When you put your focus on something that you feel, people say passionate, but for me, it's just purpose driven. So with that sense of purpose and that direction, you start to get the results. And because of that, my podcast is growing because I have a mission and a vision and a sense of purpose and a sense of why and a reason. So I just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. And it's growing and growing and growing. And my circle and network is growing because of it. If I was wishy-washy or all over the place, that wouldn't be happening nearly as easily. Um, but that's my therapy.
I love I love that you said purpose because it's like we're looking at each other through each other's eyes. When I lost my brother, I didn't know why I was so broken. And it wasn't until after I came out of it that I realized that growing, and I'll give you a little history. My brother was, by today's standards, autistic and severe stutter. I mean, the worst stutter you've ever heard in your life. His eyes would roll in his head, his face would contort. And I spent my life living in not so nice areas with a learning disabled brother who stuttered, who obviously then becomes a target.
Yeah.
And he was 3 years older than me, but I was the older brother. So I fought every day protecting my brother. So my purpose was always every single day to make sure my brother was okay. And when he died, I lost that. I didn't know how to live my life because my only real purpose was to protect my brother. And I spent 13 years trying to figure out how to fill that void of purpose that I never truly did. And it wasn't until I had my moment, my awakening, my forgiveness moment, where I realized that my purpose is the same. Just now I get to share my brother in a different way. So instead of protecting him, I'm sharing him. And I'm sharing my brother's greatness and the things how he impacted my life and so many other people's lives through his pureness and joy and love and character and who he was as a person, that became my purpose. And while serving and protecting has always been part of who I am since I was a kid, and I've been doing it well as a soldier and as a cop, my true and utter purpose is to continue to keep my brother's name alive. And I gave a talk one time to a company, and the CEO of the company said, I asked him why does he work so hard for his people, and why does he work so hard to build his company? And he said, because you die twice in this world. Once when you take your last breath, and once when they stop saying your name. And he says, I never want anyone to stop saying my name. I want my name to be remembered. And I that really hit home with me. I want my brother's name to live on. And that's why I wrote a book about our life. So that will always be there. Like this continual historical growth of how we evolve as humans and what is the end game. And, when my brother died, he had no friends. Never once did anybody come to our house and say, can you come out and play, or have a sleepover, or be invited to a birthday party. Never. But there were 1,000 people at his funeral. And I don't know where those 1,000 people came from. And it turns out after I wrote the book, I realized who all these people were. They were lives that he impacted. And that to me is what life is that you've got to end with this ability to impact lives throughout the course, whatever it's 21 years like my brother, or you live to be 99, that you impact lives along the way. And I think that's with what you're doing with your podcast, with your connectivity to people who are suffering and need someone to say you're okay. I think that's a great testament to who you are and what you're doing and with your platform.
Thank you. It's just so needed right now. Everything from COVID-related stress, the morale issues with police forces that are incredibly unfortunate, and what can I do about that? Well, this is what I do about that. So I cover those topics and provide different perspectives and different tools, and so that you do feel appreciated. You're not alone, and you have sort of a beacon of how to be just a little healthier today than you were yesterday, of how to have a better day than you otherwise would, even if it's just by 10% or 20% better. Hey, that matters, because depression frickin' sucks, as you well know. And suicidal ideations suck. Wondering, imagining how you're going to end your own life all day, every day sucks. And that dogged me for a very, very long time. It's been gone for a while now. And it feels a whole lot better when that's gone. So helping others get to that place as well, and having better days and better moments. And when you are in the pit, to not be there as long or as deeply. If I can help people do that, then awesome. Because I've been at the bottom of that pit and it sucks. It is no fun. And again, not everybody's ready for therapy. So this is in some way, in the beginning, the first few shows, I said, this is definitely not a replacement for therapy. I'm like, well, I'm not sure that it isn't. I'm not sure about that anymore. But it's an alternative. And if nothing else, it's a stepping stone to professional help. But I have tons of professionals that are on there. So lots of people with PhDs and double PhDs and everything else. And so
Brother,
there's a lot
I
of
truly,
credibility.
I truly do appreciate you. I appreciate you being a guest on the show. I'm going to close out. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk offline.
Roger that.
Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Two Dates in a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. Thank you to my amazing guest, Mark Meincke. Please go visit his podcast. Can you give the website real quick?
You bet. OperationTraumaRecovery.org. OperationTraumaRecovery.org. Or you can simply Google Operation Tango Romeo, the Trauma Recovery Podcast, on whatever your favorite platform is. Most people listen to it on Apple or Spotify, but its primary upload is on Anchor.fm.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And guess what? You're not alone if you're having a bad time. If something's happening in your life that's causing you to feel down, maybe going over to the podcast with Mark is a place for you to go and feel normal. But don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask someone for an ear, and because you're not alone in this world. And some of us had to go through the alone period to really come to terms with the fact that we're not alone, and that time we spent there was wasted time. And I truly do appreciate people like Mark being guests on my podcast. So everybody, thank you very much. God bless, and continue going out and be kind to one another.